The New York Jets traded Mecole Hardman back to the Kansas City Chiefs for a couple of late pick swaps in a stunning move, obviously, for the Jets in a free agent signing of Mecole Hardman that never really worked out. And we're going to talk to our NFL columnist, Ryan Dunleavy, here at the New York Post. Ryan, how you doing, man?
Good. How are you?
Good. So when you saw the news that Mecole was officially traded to the Chiefs, why didn't this work out here for Mecole and the Jets?
I think the Jets roster has changed since they signed Mecole Hardman. Like they signed Mecole Hardman before they had Aaron Rodgers and before they brought in Aaron Rodgers' buddy Randall Cobb to play most of the slot receivers. Before they knew exactly what Nathaniel Hackett's offense was going to look like. And Mecole Hardman he's almost like the perfect player for the Dolphins. Like, he's going to run a lot of sweeps and jets and bubbles, and the Jets offense didn't have a lot of that stuff. So he'll go to the Chiefs, where they obviously know what, he'll be reunited with Patrick Mahomes, where he played for 4 years, and they obviously know what his skill set is. They thought he could help them in the return game, and that didn't work out. It's a case of, we see this a lot of times in free agency. It's a mismatched fit. Like, oh, he's the best guy at this position who's available. We need this position. Let's get him. And then over the course of the next 5-6 months, as we go through a draft and other free agents become available, your roster changes and all of a sudden you don't need the guy. And the guy's phased out. His skills don't really match up. And it was just not necessarily an unhappy marriage, but an ill-fitted marriage.
Now, is this an indictment more on Joe Douglas, considering he brought in a new offensive coordinator, like you mentioned, Nathaniel Hackett, and how Hackett was going to use this personnel? I mean, Randall Cobb was brought in, and obviously he took over that slot receiver role. Xavier Gibson, the undrafted rookie, made a role for himself on the team. So is this an indictment on Joe Douglas for not seeing that there really wasn't a role for Mecole Hardman on this team?
An indictment's kind of a strong word. I mean, it's a loss on his personnel ledger if you're putting wins and losses. Like, this definitely goes in the loss column. And $4 million isn't cheap. I mean, the Jets are going to pay 3 of the $4 million. I think the Chiefs will pay the other $1 million. So it's not a cheap loss. $3 million in a salary cap spot, especially as tight as the Jets are. It matters, but it's not an indictment. I mean, why part of it is like, well, one of the reasons it's a loss is because of Xavier Gibson's emergence. Well, then that's a win. You found an undrafted rookie who is able to play for, the league minimum or whatever, to be your returner and your receiver and he's under contract for 3 or 4 more years. So, like, as much as Hardman's a loss, then that's a win. I guess that cancels each other out. The question is, it started to look like, does Randall Cobb lose some of his slot snaps to Mecole
Right.
Hardman? Well, that's obviously not going to happen now because Mecole Hardman is not here. Will he start to lose some to Xavier Gibson? That's worth monitoring going forward.
It's worth monitoring, but then and looking at the big picture for this Jets team the rest of the season now, it is a thin wide receiver group when you think about it. After Garrett Wilson, I mean, Allen Lazard's a nice 2, but not a great 2, if we're being honest. So, Ryan, could you see the Jets possibly adding another weapon before the trade deadline?
Yeah, I think that's a very realistic possibility. If they're going to keep winning here, let's see how they do against the Giants. But yeah, I mean, they're certainly of the mindset that Aaron Rodgers' injury didn't wipe out their playoff expectations. So they're obviously all in. So especially if they think Rodgers is going to come back. And Christopher Johnson told me yesterday at the owners meeting, he's not going to not believe it. So I'm not going to not believe it if the owner's not going to not believe it. So yeah, I think it's certainly a possibility that the Jets could go out and add a wide receiver, probably in the number 2 or number 3 mold, somebody who can have some outside versatility in case something happens to Lazard, or slide into the slot in 3 receiver packages. Yeah, I think it's totally a possibility. Now they have, a little bit of it. Now they have 2 6s in 25. Like, yeah, I think it's totally a possibility here that the Jets move a later draft pick, maybe not even a 24 draft pick, a 25 draft pick for a receiver if somebody becomes available, just not a top flight guy.
Right, right. It's interesting, obviously. And then there's one last thing I wanted to ask you, Ryan. There's Carl Lawson out there. He seems like another veteran guy that is losing snaps to the younger players, like a Jermaine Johnson and a Will McDonald. Could the Jets possibly look to move Carl Lawson before the trade deadline as well, just to clear up some more cap space?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the way Bryce Huff has come on, Jermaine Johnson has come on, they obviously want to get their rookie Will McDonald involved. There really isn't a great role here for Carl Lawson. Now, look, it's tough. This is a people business, and Carl Lawson took a pay cut
Right.
in May, which then makes him more tradable because his salary isn't as much for the next team. But he did that to help you out. He did that because he wanted to be with the Jets. So then you have to go and say, hey, thanks for doing that and making yourself more tradable. Now you're going to play for this other team and you got to uproot your life. So that's a hard conversation for a GM to have. But hey, that's why they make the big bucks. Yeah, I think it's certainly possible that he's tradable, but that might be one where they want to loop him in and say, hey, we could get a draft pick for you and you could probably go play more for Team X, or you could stay here and be maybe active, maybe inactive every Sunday. What do you want to do?
Yeah, interesting situation. Obviously, the Jets are getting their bye week. They play the Giants after that. Ryan, appreciate you as always, man.
Thanks for having me.